Hello, everybody. Assalamu alaikum. This is gonna be episode 11th, I guess, of the health show. Um, and I am super excited because today we're going to have Ken. Ken is a professional athlete. So nice to have you, Saad, Ali, and Udit. How are you guys? So Ken Gunter is basically an athlete, and he just joined, and that's amazing. We're gonna be joined by him soon. Ken?
Hey, how's it going?
Hey Ken, how are you?
I'm doing good, man. How's it? How is it over there? You have a good day? I know it's a little later than it is here.
It's good. It's good here. I'm also very excited to have you and to start the show. I'm very grateful to you. You know, you have giving your time here.
Yeah.
You're the second athlete I'm having on my show. And that's why I'm super excited. Um, how's the protein shake going on?
So it's 8 a.m. here. So I just knocked out my workout. So if I seem a little out of breath, that's why. But no,
Oh, that's good.
it should
So
carry me.
what is your timing of workouts? Like when do you work out during the day?
So most often it's early in the morning. So I still have a full-time day job. So typically, I mean, pre-pandemic, I was down here at like 5 a.m., 5:30, because I was commuting. But now that I'm work from home mostly, it's a little bit later. So I try and get in like 6:30, knock this out. Then I work on podcasts, and then I gotta start my day job that pays the bills.
That is absolutely amazing, Ken. It's like me. I wake up around 4 a.m.
Oh
and then
wow!
I go do a workout and then I start doing all of the other stuff.
So I saw that on your Instagram. So would you consider yourself a morning person?
Yes, totally. I am a morning person.
I think the older I get, the more of a morning person I'm becoming. And I think there's probably some science that backs that up. But it's certainly getting easier, and I'm getting to the point now where I can't sleep in past a certain time. You know what I mean? Even
That is so true.
if the stars
I mean,
align
if you
are
know,
here, I can't sleep past, I don't know, 7:30. So,
and you know how the saying goes, waking up early is a real boss shed. It turns out it actually is because when you
right.
wake up early, you have a lot of time to do other stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's the only way that I can get anything done. I don't know how much your followers know about me, but yeah, I mean between my fitness goals that I have today, the podcast that I'm doing, and all the things related to that, and then my day job. If I don't start the morning off on the right foot, it's just I'm playing catch up the rest of the day, and something ends up getting squeezed out. So yeah, I completely agree. Got to get up early.
That is definitely true, and I relate to it. And let's start. Let's start with your introduction. Let's tell the
Yeah.
audience who Ken Gunter actually is. Tell us about yourself. Tell us, how do you manage, being an athlete, being a podcast host, how did you got into Princeton, what did you do there? You were an executive sales executive at various companies. Tell us everything. Tell us who this Ken Gunter is, who's so inspiring, and he's just an amazing guy. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah. Wow. What an intro. I appreciate that. Yeah. So, gosh, I mean, so growing up, I felt like I played every sport I could. So football, basketball, baseball, track. I ended up at the end of high school committing to play football at Princeton University, which was awesome. So, I don't know how well your listeners know the geography of the U.S., but I grew up in Seattle, which was in like the northwest portion of the United States, and Princeton's on the complete other side of the country. So, growing up, I always wanted to play football, especially in college, and I would have loved to have played professionally, but I never entertained the idea of going to the Ivy League. Not that I didn't think academically that was an option. It was so far away, a country away, it felt like. And just like kind of a world that I probably didn't think I belonged to. But kind of, my senior year as the stars started to align, they were really interested in having me play football there, and it was such a great opportunity. Unfortunately, my parents told me not to be an idiot. So, yeah, so I ended up enrolling, and I played football there. Had a pretty decent career, had a lot of fun. We won a championship. And then after that, I kind of, like a lot of folks, once that athletic portion of my life was done, I kind of spun my wheels a little bit. I was like, man, everything I was doing was building up, towards sports. And if I wasn't going to try and play professionally, I was certain I was going to try and coach. And then, over the course of my career, I saw what sort of investment that lifestyle takes, and the amount of time you spend on the road and how challenging it is if you have a family, which I always knew was something that I wanted. So, I was like, man, I don't think that's the path I want to go down. So now I was at this crossroads where I was like, what do I do with my life? I had an interest in marketing, which is funny because that kind of ends up coming full circle. So I was like, all right, let me do this. And I want to live in New York City. I want to have that experience. So I did that for 3 years. And it's funny now, married with my wife and we have 3 kids together, trying to do all these things that I'm doing. When I had all this free time at age 23 to 28, like I wasn't setting the world on fire. So if people are like, I wasn't like, I wasn't working around the clock. I wasn't like getting my hands on all these projects. I was doing my job. I was having fun. I was enjoying New York City. But over time I was like, man, I'm kind of getting tired of this. I want to start doing something athletic again. And I got involved with a startup company. And that's when I transitioned into sales. And so for all those listening, I do sales today for like my full-time job. So that kind of started to feed some of that competitiveness in the corporate world that had kind of been missing from my day-to-day, which was great. But I really started missing like the athletic aspect as well. So for me, fast forward a little bit, I get married. My wife and I have a daughter. I'm working at a startup. I now have all the pressures that come with each of those roles. And for me, like some of these kind of, the best way I can describe it is like cracks kind of start to show. So I start to like feel stressed. I'm not sleeping as well. I don't feel as healthy. I'm irritable. I'm just kind of like, man, what is going on? Like I was humming pretty well when I was only responsible for myself. But now that, I have people that depend on me and real world pressures, it started to add up. So I was like, okay, I got to figure this problem out because the end result, if this keeps going the way it's going, is not good for anybody. Thinking back to college, I was like, well, I loved training. It made me feel better. I felt healthier. Surprisingly and counterintuitively for a lot of folks who don't maybe work out, like you actually get more energy from working out. So okay, I'm going to double down. I'm going to start doing the things that kind of got me to a really good place at one point. So I did that, and along that journey, I really tried to like understand, hey, what has changed in the last 10 years? What are people doing from a training perspective? What are they doing from a sleep perspective? And so kind of like going through this like self-discovery, I was like, man, there's so much incredible information out there. I feel like a huge knowledge gap exists between what the average person either has access to or is like being made aware of in an easily digestible way. So through conversations with friends about something just as like foundational as sleep, I was like, man, there's like an audience for this. And even though not everyone can actually be in the NFL, the NBA, like I think people care just as much about their own goals in their own life that they would benefit from being exposed to like these techniques and these methods and these concepts. So that's kind of where the idea for the podcast was born. It's like, let's interview really interesting people, coaches, athletes, trainers, thought leaders, expose listeners to these new ideas in hopes that they can kind of incorporate into their own life and certainly reach their own athletic goals. But I believe more importantly, reach their potential as like a parent, a partner, a professional, because I think at the end of the day, when we look back on our life, most of us would say those are the things that matter most. So that's how the podcast kind of got started. I don't know if that's what you were looking for. On the athletic side, I do a decathlon, which is a lot of fun. And I've had a lot of success with that. And it got canceled this year, of course. So I've kind of transitioned my efforts into going after a couple world records in pull-ups, of all things.
Whoa.
As niche of a topic as that
Yeah,
is.
yeah, I've been seeing those posts on your feed though. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's been a lot of fun. I don't know, and maybe you relate to this. Like I do much better with a goal, and it's a lot more fun if it's a big goal. So like for me, if I'm going to work out an hour a day, it's nice to know that for that hour, I have a very specific task that I'm working towards. It keeps me motivated, keeps me excited.
That is so true. I mean, Ken, the idea that you had, just explained about the podcast, it's the same for me because
Awesome.
I thought why not? Because I want to learn the science. There's so much available, and what if I really interview people and athletes and health experts and people out there, and learn real life insights from them, and not only for myself, but I also share it with my people. So bringing them real value. So
Yeah.
this that was something that kind of started this the health show as well. And that's why I'm so inspired from you as well, because you yourself as a podcast host, and you have achieved much success. You're doing a lot of challenges and a lot of goals, just like you mentioned.
Yeah. I appreciate
Having a
it.
bigger goal is something that challenges you and forces you to become a better version of yourself, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All
Absolutely.
right. So
That's why
moving
when you reached
on,
out, I was like, oh, this is fantastic. And where are you located exactly?
I'm located in Islamabad, Pindi, Islamabad, Rawalpindi. So Islamabad is capital of Pakistan.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. So I mean, that's one of the things I was like, because the podcast launched in February, right? So what is that? 4 or 5 months. Even though I had huge aspirations for it, at no point did I think that someone in Pakistan would resonate with it and we would be having this conversation. So I think that's just a testament to whoever's listening. If you have something that you're really passionate about, like just get started, because you have no idea where it's going to take you eventually. And I still have no idea where this is going to take me, but this is such an awesome experience.
That is so true. I mean, I never, imagined that I'd be having conversation with you right now.
Yeah.
But, as I began the sales show, this sort of is a very transformational idea in itself. And when you start bringing real value to people, it is just an amazing, it's an amazing atmosphere that you build.
Absolutely.
Okay, Ken, tell us about this.
Yeah.
Being a professional athlete, how do you keep yourself healthy, and how can we as people, normally without any equipment, without any gym, how can we, keep ourselves healthy as well?
Yeah. So I think about this a lot. And let me start by saying, by no means am I an expert, right? Like I kind of try to like curate experts because I'm on the same journey everyone else is. Like I'm trying to figure this out too. And some days it feels like it's, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I think what's really important is like the constant pursuit of improvement. But I'll say this, I kind of think about it foundationally. There's 3 things that people really should be paying attention to. And this is my own opinion. I put sleep first and foremost. And that did not used to be the case for me. I think, some of those issues I had when I was working at the startup and, raising a young family and trying to do everything, I was trying to pull time away from sleep to put more hours into the day. And while that might be something that works in the short term, over time, things start to break down. So I would say prioritize sleep, number one. And of the guests that we've spoken to, that seems to be like uniformly something that is just agreed upon. No one challenges this notion that we need to sleep. So that's a big one. Make sure you're making time to sleep. And there's a lot of great free and cheap information out there as to how you can kind of optimize your sleep. I could certainly recommend a few books that I really enjoy. Maybe I'll send them to you and you can share them with your followers.
For sure.
The other thing I think is, nutrition. Like everyone says that so broadly. I don't prescribe to any specific diet per se. Rather, I try and just use like really good common sense. I feel like intuitively, most people, if presented with choices, would be able to like kind of understand what's healthy and what's not. Like whole foods. I don't know if you're I think you are plant-based, right? Right.
Yeah.
So say if you're plant-based, that's even easier. Like focus on veggies. Probably shouldn't fry them all the time, right? Just common sense things. That's kind of how I approach it, and it served me well. And then the last thing is fitness. Find some sort of like exercise that you're interested in. So for me, I certainly like training that is like strength and conditioning based, more like high performance oriented. But that's what works for me, and that's what gets me excited. So, if you're out there listening, I think what's important is find something that's going to keep you motivated to keep coming back, because across those 3 foundational pillars, I think the most critical thing, and what I keep hearing from guests, we've done 25 of these now, It's consistency, and it's consistency over time. Like no matter what your approach is, there's a lot of different ways to skin the cat, as they say. You have to stick with it, otherwise nothing is going to work out for you. You know, so those are the big ones for me. I don't know, and I would ask you, do you agree? Do you feel differently?
No, I completely agree. And as a matter of fact, what you just mentioned about consistency, that is the root of everything. Like, whatever your approach is, you have to go to the bed at the same time, you have to eat at the same time, you have to work out at the same times. No matter what the time you approach is, day is at night, no matter what it is, it's consistency. That is the first thing. Like if you're not consistent, then no matter what you do, no matter how hard, how much money you spend, what kind of trainers accustomed to, whatever gyms you go to, it's not gonna, make an effect because the root thing is not working out. And that's something you all need to internalize because, in this world, we have a lot of distractions, right? A lot of us, we want to go on a paleo diet, on a keto diet, on intermittent fasting, and this and that, and this and all of that stuff.
Right.
Nobody wants to stick to the simple things and, just be consistent with it first, build that up.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. I have a lot of friends who have, I think experimentation with regards to diet, workouts is fantastic. And I think if that also keeps you interested, like then that in itself is a win, right? But I think if you're constantly finding yourself jumping from like one diet to the next, or like one type of workout to the next, and you feel like nothing's working, it's like you're probably not sticking with any one thing long enough to give it time to work. There's actually a fantastic book. It's called The Power of Habit. I don't know if you've heard of that. And
No, I haven't.
The author's name's escaping me at the moment. But I can't remember the exact stat. I'm going to mess it up. But it's something like it takes nearly 60 days to formulate a habit. So I mean, that's
yes, exactly.
Like an insight, like biologically and like neurologically, how we work. Like 60 days. Like, can you stick with something for nearly 2 months before you give up on it? I think that's probably just a good, like, high level perspective for people to have.
And when we look at it, it's also one of the most common problems people have when they cannot, achieve anything because, they're not even consistent with it in the first place.
Yeah.
So that's what I tell my followers as well. I started this movement of waking up at 4 a.m. So 4 a.m. club, I'm a member of that. And, I started this movement by showcasing, pictures of my watch every single day when I wake up. And a lot of people have, they've helped, they've got inspiration from this and, they're working out now and, they're with me on this. And I feel like that is something we all need to talk about more and more. Because whatever diet you go, whatever experiments you do, whatever exercise you do, you go into compound lifts, you go into isolation exercises, you go into keto, paleo, intermittent fasting, whatever you do, you just have to be consistent with it. And just like you said, 60 days is like a minimum benchmark that you need to achieve.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And so let me ask you, with the 4 a.m. club, are you going to bed earlier to get up?
Yeah, I go to bed at like 10 p.m.
Okay. So you're getting in your 6 hours.
Yeah.
And
that's good enough for me. It works for me. 6 hours works for me.
And I think that's something that's been interesting too, is just understanding how individualized everything is based, from how much sleep you need to what sort of workout you respond to. I think what becomes confusing is there's almost, and I feel this way too, as someone who like really is passionate about this stuff, it's almost like information overload. And it's like
so true.
The barrier for entry for someone to put something up on the internet is pretty minimal. So it's like you really have to be careful with like who you're sourcing your information from. But then on top of that, you have to understand, like, does this work for me as an individual? And that's why I think it's that continual process of improvement and refinement and trying, you know what I mean, to kind of get towards your like optimal self.
That is absolutely true. And that makes me move on to my next question, which is, what's that one thing you had wished you had known before you began your journey as an athlete?
Man, the one thing I wish I had known. It's funny. I've had a couple professional athletes on recently, and one of the things that they've said is you have to be really careful whose advice you take. It's very easy if someone's in a position of, I'll use the word power, so to speak, but like say a coach, Just because someone has rose to that position doesn't mean that they necessarily know what they're talking about or giving you good advice. I think maybe over the course of my career, there's a lot of stuff, but of course, like with everything we know today about training, there's things I could have done to have been, perform better, run faster, jump higher, all those things. I think maybe I would have been a little more critical of like whose advice I took and what sort of stuff I actually tried to integrate and what sort of things I said, you know what, that's not the right approach. I'm going to double down on what's actually working well for me. And that could mean lots of things, right? So it could have meant in college, and this is not a knock on our strength and conditioning coach, but like this is as an example, like, do I take the time to work out with someone who is like the more convenient option that is kind of like the historical safe choice? Or do I go out and find one of these specialists who are cutting edge and, incredible and like kind of take that risk on myself and work with someone of that caliber, so it's about making all these constant decisions. I don't think I ended up in a terribly necessarily, far from where I would like to be, but that's like the sort of thing I think that I would probably tell myself back then.
Wow, that is beautiful, and that's just such an insightful thing for all the people. Whether you're talking about mental health, whether you're talking about health in general, whether you're talking about exercise, training or whatever you want to do, going to an expert, going to some, a place that is, very critical for you and that is certified or something that gives you an accurate information is very essential. All right, Ken. My next question is.
I'll add this too.
Yeah,
I do think this is important. Coaches and specialists are more available than ever, thanks to the internet. Take the extra time. If you're the sort of person where you find yourself, I'm short on time, I don't have the time to figure out my own workout plan, or I don't know the right way to do this, like make the investment in yourself to go out and get a great coach. But then also take the time to vet, like, hey, is this person credible? Either do they have like the certification that's needed? Have they been doing this for a while? Chad Wesley Smith, who was on my show, said like, have they done it themselves? Right? Not always a requirement, but like a good indicator that they know what they're talking about. So, I wholeheartedly recommend going and getting coaching, but make sure that you vet those coaches because you're going to spend a lot of time and money with that individual.
That is so true. That is so true. All right, Ken, my next question is, what has been your biggest failure and what did you learn out of it?
Oh, my biggest failure. Let's see. You know what? I'll tell you what my biggest failure is, and it might not be what you're expecting. In college, I let some of these kind of folks that I was alluding to kind of like take the fun out of the game for me. I went through a period, my last season there, where I got hurt early on. And now, I think if I told you what my recovery process looked like, everyone would be like, that is a terrible idea. And I just, something that meant so much to me for so long, I let someone kind of like take the joy out of it, and kind of run me into the ground a little bit. And I think, I let that leave a bad taste in my mouth. And for that reason, I probably didn't pursue things beyond that otherwise I would have. And so I think, that was probably, if I look back, that's probably something that I regret. I let someone kind of ruin something that was really special for me. It ended up, my senior season actually ended up very much on a high note, which is great and it's fun to look back on. But I think when I look back, I kind of get mad at myself a little bit for letting someone kind of like wear me down. So I think, for people listening, if you learn from my mistakes so you don't have to do it, don't let someone take that from you. Keep your head held high, stay confident, and don't let them drag you in the mud.
That is definitely true. My next question is the most exciting question of this show. It's this. If you had the time, energy, and money to do anything in this world to keep you healthy, what would you do?
Oh, man. You don't even want to know the weird stuff that I would try out. I love all this kind of like fringe recovery medicine. Everything from like my wife and I were just talking about hyperbaric chambers last night. She was like, "You need to get someone on to talk about that." But like, I would do it all. I would do cryotherapy. I would have a full-on like UV sauna built in my house. I would go all in on like anti-aging, longevity. Because for me, like and I remember talking to my dad about this, and I now, as I'm older, I resonate. Like, I love life. Like, I want to be here as long as I can. I want to be here as long as I can for my kids. I want to be someone that's like active in their life. When I have grandkids, I want to be running around with them. So for me, not only like performing at a high level today is super important. People might like laugh at this, but I want to look the exact same. And I'm not talking like wrinkles, but I mean in terms of like physical ability. I want to be exactly the same at 43 and 53 as I am today at 33. And I think there's enough examples of that out there today, people who are doing it effectively, that it's not a crazy notion. I'm not talking like Walt Disney, I'm going to like cryo freeze myself and try and come back in 100 years. But I think if I do a good job of like focusing on like those three kind of foundational principles: sleep, working out, recovery, and nutrition, I have a chance at kind of like being able to continue to perform at a really high level for a really long time. So for me, that's inspiring. So if you're asking if there was if I had a blank check, I'd be doing all of it. I'd be getting like massages. I'd have Theraguns. I'd have the Normatec boots. I'd be doing some of these crazy infusions. I would do all that stuff. I love it.
That is just so beautiful in its sense, because I relate to that. We have numerous examples right now. Like it's not Walt Disney or that imaginary stuff anymore. In 2020, we have a lot of people out there who are in their 60s and 70s, and they look like they're in their 30s and 40s. I mean, come on, and that's just so inspiring.
Exactly.
I mean, there's like lots of people, and I saw this documentary, Game Changers, if you've seen that on Netflix.
Yeah.
It's about plant-based and all that. And there's a guy who's 60 years old, and he's doing so much. And I'm just like, oh my God, that was my eye-opening moment. And I was like, man, I want to be that guy.
Exactly.
And then I read, Tools of Titans by Tim Ferriss, if he's a great author.
Oh, yeah.
And so he has, all his podcasts in that, summarized in that book, Tools of Titans. And in that, there's numerous examples of, people living with that is just like eye-opening for me, that's all, Because now there's like numerous examples, and just like you mentioned, if we fix our sleep, nutrition, and working out, we can actually make that leap. We can actually reach that point.
Yep. Completely agree. And I think it's fun. I'm not one of these like eccentrics who thinks that I'm never going to die, right? But while I'm here, I want to kind of continue to live like at the highest level possible for me. So
I mean, while you're alive, you want to live healthy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think we're at an interesting point. Like, we're on this kind of like hockey stick point of the curve where like technology and knowledge are like, what's the right word? Developing.
Overwhelming.
Yeah, just that like it's unprecedented over human history. Like, we're in a very pivotal moment, I feel like, where there's going to be those who take advantage of the information that's available. And then there's going to be those who just kind of continue to do things as they've always done. And me personally, where I think you're going to really start to kind of see this separation is as folks start to age. It's going to be the difference of like an 80-year-old out playing tennis at their tennis club and someone else, potentially sitting on the sidelines in a wheelchair because they've been active for 40 years. So, I think we're going to see, especially within our generation, folks continue to do really active things at a high level until much later in life, which is, I think, really fun.
And when I talk about all of this to my friends and relatives, and they're like eating junk food and they're like doing all that crazy stuff, and I'm like, I'm talking to them about this, and they're like, we're gonna die anyway. I mean, come on. And I'm like, right. You're gonna die anyway. Might as well live healthy while you can, right?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
No, my favorite is always people love to throw, well, I could get hit by a bus tomorrow. I'm like, okay, well, yeah, you could. I don't know if that's like the basis for how I live my life for the next 30 years, the fact that potentially could happen. But yeah, I agree. I think I resonate more with your logic for sure.
That is absolutely true. I mean, and it's funny. I mean, and you're like, oh my god, and what do I tell this guy now? You know, like it's
Absolutely.
just so lame. It's just so lame. I mean, come on.
It definitely is. I agree. I agree.
All right,
You
Ken.
can't
So
help
tell me
everybody.
about this. Yeah, so tell me about this. If you could step into my shoes right now, if Ken is down here as well as over here as well, what is this Ken going to ask this Ken that I
Oh,
didn't?
so if I could ask myself a question, man, boy, this is a deep show. If I could ask myself a question, it would probably be, and I ask myself this a lot. You know, why are you working so hard? Like, what is your end goal? Um, you know, and for me, what I would say, just talking to myself on this show, you know, I want to have like freedom of time. And the reason I want to have freedom of my own time and control over my own time is like to spend more time with my kids, do more things, you know, with my family and spend time doing things that matter to me. And what I would ask myself as a follow-up, because I do this all the time, it's like, you know, in this pandemic, in this quarantine, like you have an opportunity to do that right now. Are you taking advantage of it? And I think that's something that is upsetting to me at times. I'm constantly in a tug of war of like trying to work and build this thing in addition to like my day job, which requires a lot of effort, you know, to like get to a place where I feel like I'm very secure and I have that freedom that I desire, that at times, you know, I overlook the fact that I could be spending that quality time with my family right now. So, that's probably what I would ask myself a bit rhetorically. And it's kind of like, hey, you need to kind of like reframe like what your priorities are and like how can you actually be living those priorities right now?
That is so true. It's like a constant struggle, right? Between
Yeah.
family, you know, your side hustle, and then, you know, your day job. It's like, you know, it consumes you. And, you know, the answer lies in the fact that you have to prioritize your life, right? You have to see what really matters. I mean, that's so true because, you know, I wanted to, you know, shed off my fat. So this is like for my personal example, what I'm doing right now. I'm
Yeah.
shedding off my, you know, belly fat right now to just, you know, make some abs appear and, you know, not like, you know, I'm going to build some abs. The abs are already there. I'm just
Yeah.
going to
Yeah.
let them appear, right?
Right. Right.
And so what I wanted to do is I'm already plant based, so it's good enough. I'm working on my sleep schedule as well. That's good enough too.
Yeah.
What I'm working right now is I'm working out 2 times a day. And so, you know, I've thought of, I had this fear of going to catabolic stress, you know, the phenomena that, you know, when you were working out too much and you're not taking in too much of carbs and fats,
Yeah.
ultimately, you know, it's going to break down your muscle as well. So I had this fear as well. So, you know, again, relating to what you just said, it's like a constant struggle of, you know, fixing every single thing. Like it's like the, you know, the sides, all this triangle has to be complete, right?
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Tied it all in. You know what I do too, and maybe you'll relate to this. I have kind of tried to remind myself like it's a long game. You know, like if
Definitely, 100%.
this podcast or like your fitness goal, like it doesn't need to happen next month. Like it kind of extend your time horizon for it and don't beat yourself up so much. Because you know, my wife can tell you all the time. I'm like, man, like I just want to get this thing going. I want to like it's doing well, but I want to get it bigger. Like I don't want to sit around and wait. But I think reminding yourself, like, hey, if it's a worthwhile objective, you know, like be willing to extend that time horizon out. And I think that gives you a little bit more flexibility, you know, for you in your fitness goal, like don't run yourself into the ground, right? For me, it's like, don't work around the clock, like make time for your kids. Take the weekend off and just like spend time with them. Like this doesn't need to get solved overnight. That's the kind of perspective that I think I try and keep. I'm not going to claim that I do it great all the time because I just kind of have that personality. But yeah, certainly something I think about for sure.
That is just so true, Ken. I mean, you know, the reason why we all want these targets and goals to happen the next day is because, you know, we don't love the process. We just want the end goal.
Yeah,
But the
yeah.
whole beauty is in loving the process, right? Every single day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and I remember having the thought when I recorded my first podcast, the first episode. I didn't have any listeners other than like my wife, my mom, and my mother-in-law. And, you know, I was like, there's some insecurity that kind of happens there. You're like, oh, are people going to like this? How am I going to get people to find the show? You know, and then you get all this self-doubt. and it's like, oh, I just want to get it to a point where it's X number of listeners, X number of followers, it's making an impact. And then over the course of those like first maybe 5 that I was doing, and maybe I hadn't even released one yet, I was like, you know what? I'm actually doing it. Like this, I've made a podcast. I'm doing it. I'm having great conversations. Once people did start listening, positive feedback came that it was making an impact in their life. And so you're right. Like, it's very easy to get hung up in like, what is your end goal? Like Joe Rogan, $100 million contract with Spotify. It's like, you know what? You can enjoy it before it gets to that point. And I think you're right. Trusting the process and enjoying the process, because ultimately, like, that's what most of the journey is, quite frankly.
That is so true. Kane, tell us about this. How do you keep yourself creative? Creative about being, your podcast, creative in your work, creative in your other commitments and responsibilities. How do you keep yourself in the zone?
Oh man. So, for anyone out there who has something that they're passionate about, I have no interest no trouble staying creative with where I want the show to go. In fact, like my mind is constantly racing about, oh my God, I could do this. Or, oh my God, here's a great marketing idea. Or, oh, I would love to get this guest, or I would love to do this content. Like, I think that stems from like my passion for it, that those sort of things they just happen. So for me, I think, where can like the creativity actually come from? I think the more things that you can expose yourself to, the more inputs, will help create like ideas. Like if you just stay in one lane, if you just keep working in isolation, if I only exposed myself to like my content all the time, my creativity would probably start to like become diminished. But I try and expose myself to like everything from like books about the Civil War, you know what I mean, to like really innovative, like cutting edge podcasts, or, just to kind of have like a wide array of like what's happening culturally, and like kind of understand like where can I interject that into what I'm trying to do with the show. And I would ask you the same question.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. How about yourself?
So how do I do it? Basically, again, if you're passionate about something, you don't need a reason. You just love the process and you just do it every single day, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like the same thing. I'm always thinking about, how can I, make my the live show better? How can I, make more engagement on Facebook? How can I make more engagement on YouTube and stuff like that? Being a doctor, I just, absolutely love medicine, and that's why I'm so vocal about it. That's why the whole health show, is here in the first place. So like I have big goals. I have like really, really big goals of, building an organization and inspiring a movement and all of that.
Yeah.
And so, that is just too much, and sometimes it, overwhelms me. But how do I keep myself in the zone, and how do I keep myself focused? It's because I meditate, 2 times a day, 15 minutes. And it really helps. It actually really helps, before I started meditation, I used to be like, okay, that's something these people do, and, maybe it's now a trend, and it doesn't work and all of that. But once I started doing it, eventually, my mind just opened, and, I started being mindful, and it was just a, beautiful experience.
Yeah.
And so, that's something, I can literally sit in the next room. I can literally sit down in the floor, in the complete darkness, and I can be in my mind. I can be in the mountains. And I can beat the mountains, my body you respond the same way, and it's so amazing.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's something.
It's just amazing, and that's what I do.
I need to make more time for it, because when I do meditate, I agree. And I find it clears your mind so that you can be more creative. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Because, I think what myself and a lot of folks struggle with, who are dealing with a lot of different responsibilities. I mean, just, take the stress of work alone. It's easy to just constantly get caught in this cycle where you're just constantly thinking about, what do I have to do? I have to respond to this email. I have this obstacle I got to figure out. And like, if your wheels just never shut off, you need to create that headspace for yourself to be creative if that's something that you're passionate about. And I agree, meditation is an awesome way to do that.
All right. There's another question that I got in the DMs about this, and I was, you being a podcast, you're doing so much crazy stuff and so much inspiring stuff. There might be, and there must be some times when you're just down. There are a lot of factors. Maybe you didn't have a lot of engagement. Maybe you didn't have the guests you wanted. Maybe you didn't have the kind of exposure you wanted to. Maybe you didn't have the impact you wanted to. So like, there's a lot of stuff that can put you down.
Yeah.
How do you keep afloat? How do you stay afloat? And how do you pursue every single day? How do you maintain consistency?
So I'll tell you with regards to the podcast, how I do that. So for me, you know, yes, like there's goals that I have for the podcast, the show, and the brand that I'm building. You know, that could be financial, or it could be like creating freedom for myself, right? But what keeps me going, you know, is one, I'm getting a tremendous amount of value out of it, but two, like I really want to help people. And I think, you know, a reason for this, like kind of like passionate side project that I have is, while I'm excelling at my day job, I don't feel like I was having the impact that maybe I was capable of having. Right? Like it's checking some of those boxes in terms of like financial security, stability, you know, critical things like healthcare, right? Like it's a fantastic company and I actually really enjoy what I do. You know, but there's always that part of me, like I said, like I thought maybe I was going to go into coaching. You know, and I think that's because I want to help. I like seeing people get better. And I want to be a part of that process. And so for me, it's like, you know, I get reached out from people all over the world who are like, hey man, I loved your show. Like this really helped. Or, hey, I listened to Dr. Colleen Hacker and it was so motivating. I went out and worked out for the first time in a couple months. You know, it's like, it's that sort of feedback that at times, to your point, if it's like, man, like it's not growing as fast as I want, or, that episode didn't get that much engagement. Like what's going on? You get a message like that and you're like, you know what, that time that I spent putting that out there, that made an impact for that person. And you don't know the ripple effect that could have. You know, it might change that person's life. And they might become a better parent because now they're prioritizing their own health and well-being. And that's what's exciting to me. And that's, you know, all these other goals that I have, like I said, you know, financial freedom of time, like those things matter and are important to me, but it's like, man, how cool it could be to make like a really big lasting impact by kind of bridging this knowledge gap for people so that people start living a better life. So that's what keeps me going when I'm up at 9 p.m. on a Monday night doing the show notes, like trying to get the episode art together to get everything out the next morning if I'm behind that week or if I've had a big work project. Like, you know, it's like, no, this is actually making a difference. That's, I think, what's, you know, the motivator and the catalyst for me.
You know, what you just mentioned is like the crux of everything I do, because there's lots of times where, you know, I had just a 2-minute conversation with, you know, somebody on Instagram, you know, on text, on DMs. And, you know, they would just tell me about their problems and, you know, I would just have a conversation with them. And that would have such a massive and such an insane, massive shift into their mental health. And the next day they'll be like, you know, thank you so much. It meant a lot. And, you know, it just changed the whole perspective. And I'm like, whoa. And I'm just like shocked because it was just 2 minutes for me. It was nothing for me, but it was everything for that person. And that's just, you know.
I agree. And do you have kids yet?
No, I don't.
So I will say, you know, hand in hand for me, and I think about this a lot. You know, I've always had things I'm really passionate about. I've had, you know, really big dreams and big goals. You know, having kids, my daughter's now 5, soon to be 6. You know, I was like, I'm going to tell her to like follow her dreams. I'm going to tell her to like live out her passion and like take a risk. And that caused me to be like, well, am I doing that in my own life? Like, am I setting an example of that for her? Or am I kind of just settling for what's safe and convenient? I'm not like trying to live out on the fringes at all. And so that's another big piece for me is, you know, I want to set an example of like, hey, you want to do something that's not very common or that requires that you put yourself out there in a way that feels uncomfortable. I want to like set that example for them that like, hey, it's okay to take risks. It's okay to like, you know, follow your passion and do something that you believe in. And so that's also a huge motivator for me. And I watch my kids and I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to see what they're going to be interested in, what they're going to end up doing, you know? And I hope that at least like with what my wife and I are trying to do, we're setting an example of like, just go after it, you know? It might fail, but like, just go after it. Cause you don't want to live life with any regrets.
That is so true. I mean, the biggest poison in us is the regrets, right? Nobody wants to have regrets.
No, yeah.
That is the biggest poison. And you're so right, because, you know, even if you fail, you know, that's going to be hell of a story, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and you know what it is, too? It's easy, and I felt this way. So look, going to Princeton, there's a very traditional path that you could go down that would be acceptable, right? And I don't mean to say acceptable as in other things would be frowned upon, but I mean that would be more commonplace. Go into finance, becoming a doctor, right? All these traditional, really highly educated, like well-paying roles are things that on paper, it's like, that's absolutely like the safe bet and a bet that could like do incredible things for your life. And, you know, so like in doing this podcast, especially something around like fitness and wellness, whether right or not, I was like, oh man, what are people going to think? You know, how is this going to come off? Like, what are they going to think of me? And then finally, you know, I don't know if you let cursing on your program. I was like, fuck it. Like, it matters to me. I think it's really important. And I'm going to do it. And, you know, all of those fears that I had before starting it, like they've never come to fruition. You know, maybe people are saying something behind my back, but like it's behind my back. Like I don't get exposed to it.
Who cares?
And on the flip side, completely counter to that, people who I actually thought would like maybe judge me have reached out and been like, hey man, this is awesome. Keep it going. Like, I love what you're doing. Like, people need this. And it's like, you know, what if I'd let that kind of like head trash talk myself out of doing this for, you know, the perception that someone might think what I'm doing is like a little weird. So.
That is absolutely true. You know, there's a saying in which it states that when you're trying to do something big, you know, the people, you know, near to you, the relatives, the family, the friends, and all of that, they just, you know, they judge you, they pour shit on you. The only people that support you during that time are the strangers. But when you reach the top, you find out no strangers out there. All those friends and families and relatives, all they're there to support you and cheer you up. And that is such a great, you know, a perspective giver, because you understand that, you know, you just have to love the journey. You just have to do it every single day. And having the intention that you're providing value to people, and not caring about what anybody thinks of you. And like, that is something that liberates you a lot, that, you know, keeps desk quiet.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, it's easier said than done for sure. And I think social media is a double-edged sword. It's easy to see other people having success and be like, oh man, like I'm nowhere near that. Or like, God, I don't look that happy. And what a great filter. Like, where are they? You know, so, but it's like, yeah, it's like at the end of the day, like you're responsible for yourself. You got to look yourself in the mirror and you got to be happy with what you're putting out. And I'm getting more comfortable with that. And fortunately, you know, my wife supports me like crazy, which is awesome. So, you know, I always get that positive reinforcement, which is huge. I hope people who are trying to do something have someone like that. You know, and I have gotten a lot of support from family and friends, which makes it easier. But yeah, you know, I don't know how this fits into your show, but I've always kind of said this thing, and maybe I'll share it here. But you know, I've always, it can sound kind of negative, but I've always just remind myself like, look, no one's coming for you. No one's coming to help. You know, and I think that was kind of born out of like once I started my own family and like something would go wrong around the house. It's like your dad's not coming to fix it for you. Like those days are gone. Like it's on you now to get this done. You know, and so I kind of think about that in terms of like my goals with the podcast or fitness. It's like no one else is going to do this for you. It's like if you want to get this done, like the time is now and you have to take action. And I kind of always keep that in the back of my mind. And that keeps me like moving forward, even though the path might feel like a bit unclear. Or a bit overwhelming to your point. Like if you have massive goals for your show, you know, and I believe you'll get there. Cause you know what I mean? You're persistent in reaching out to me and you like run a great operation, but you know, it's like, it feels like a long journey, but it's like, just keep the ball rolling. And you don't know when it's going to pick up momentum. You don't know when that tipping point's going to happen, but you have to like be responsible for yourself and take that action.
That is definitely so true. I mean, you know what you just mentioned, accountability, that is something that really matters. I mean, you know, once you start being accountable to yourself, once you start realizing that no matter what happens to your life, you know, once you're in this path, no matter what you do, whatever happens, it's your responsibility. You can't blame anyone. It all comes down to you, I mean, you know, and that's something that obviously empowers you as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and it can be uncomfortable too when the result is not what you wanted. Like that's also on you.
So true. There's a lot of loneliness in that.
Yeah, and I know you're part of the 4 a.m. crew, so I imagine, are you a fan of Jocko Willink?
Yes, I am,
Uh,
and that's where the whole voice thingy goes.
that's what I thought. That's what I thought. Yeah, man. I mean, of course, now extreme. What is it? Extreme Ownership. His first book.
Yeah.
You know, when I read that, that just struck such a chord with me, because it kind of verbalized a lot of the things that I had either believed or learned, and a lot of that learned the hard way. You know, like I'm like anyone else. I make mistakes. I fall short. I'm not always accountable. I now make a very conscious effort to try to be. But that just kind of, like put it in perspective. It's like, man, like you are accountable and you have to take ownership for the good, the bad, everything that happens. And that, like, to your point, that can feel like a lot of weight, but it also is very freeing. It's like, look, if this is going to happen, it's because I'm going to make it happen. And so
So
if you
true.
take it with that perspective, it's like you have control over your destiny, whether that's at work, at school, with your family, your relationship, like take some solace in that, like you do have ownership of how that turns out.
All right, Ken, we had such amazing and insightful conversations right now. I want to talk about mental health, right?
You want to talk about what?
Mental health is not something that is very much talked about or given attention in Pakistan, especially. And that's why, I'm raising my voice for it. Although we're no experts right now, I'm becoming a doctor, but I'm still not an expert. But that's something, I want to raise my voice to it because it's not something that is, spoken about. So a lot of people we see
Mental
every
health?
single day,
You said mental health?
yeah, mental health, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we all go through mental health issues, depression, anxiety, a lot of problems we go on. And a lot of times people don't take therapy as an option, right? They conceal everything in themselves. They go into this denial phase. And, this ends up, decluttering their mind. They start overthinking and, eventually it just messes up their whole life, right?
Yeah.
What's your take into this? And how do you think people should approach mental health?
This is something that I think about a lot. And it's something that, as I grow this show, I really want to make a core focus. Because I think mental health encompasses a lot of different things. If I just like relate it to my situation right now at this moment, I get stressed, I get anxious, and that's because I'm trying to do a lot of things at once. And it's easy for like anxiety to creep in, and anxiety can come in a lot of different forms. But for me, it's like, am I doing enough? Am I doing enough to like move things forward? Am I doing things to keep my family secure in this crazy pandemic and quarantine? And that can like really start to weigh on you. And so, I think the more that we can educate folks on something as simple to do as meditation as a way to like help improve your mental health, to getting a therapist, like especially in masculine culture, and it sounds like in Pakistan as well, there's like a mental toughness element, or like just a toughness, and it's not okay to get help. And I think that's something that we need to demystify. And I think a way that can happen is changing the perspective. It's not like, hey, we need to solve this weakness. It's rather, hey, we need to help you to be able to like perform at your best. Like, let's look at it from a performance standpoint. Like right now, there's something holding you back. Like, let's go get you, call him a coach. Let's get you a coach to help you get you performing where you want to be. Like, put it in the weight room. Let's say someone wants to improve their 40-yard dash. Maybe they're going to do the NFL combine, or they're trying to get into college, right? A coach would come in and assess their weaknesses and say, hey, here's the things you do really well. Here's the areas where you have opportunity for improvement. Like, let's go work on those things where you're underperforming so that you can perform better in the 40. It's crazy that we don't do that for mental health. Because like, we all want to be the best version of ourselves, and that can sound really hokey. Like, hey, let's all be the best versions of ourselves. What are you, another guru? But no, like, like let's drop some of that baggage so that you can go out and be a better parent, so you can perform at a higher level at work. So mental health is huge. And then, on the other side of that, for me personally, mental illness is something that I've contended with in my life, and not me as an individual. But there's folks in my family who have had mental illness, and my father struggled with bipolar. And the reason it's so important to me is my father was the epitome of hardworking. lived an honest life. You know, I mean, if he drank, he had a couple beers. Not there's anything wrong with drinking. I mean, I'm sitting in a bar. I hope people see I'm not on my high horse. You know, but it's like I've seen such an example in my own life of someone who's doing everything right, and I would argue went above and beyond and accomplished way more than he probably should have ever been expected to, but had to contend with this mental illness. And I mean, it would just pull the rug out from underneath him for no fault of his own, right? So for me, I think raising awareness about mental health is critical. I think it's absolutely necessary, and I think we're getting better. I hope globally we continue to get better. But I also think there's a huge demystification that needs to happen around mental illness. And I think folks need to feel more empowered to get help. Because there are things that can be done to help someone who's dealing with that, like any other illness. But there's such a stigma around it that folks are scared. They're scared to tell friends. They're scared to tell employers. They're scared to go get help because they're worried, like, how's that going to be perceived at my job? And am I putting like all these things that I depend upon at risk? So it's such a massive issue. And you know, to get back kind of to what you're saying, like mental health, like I personally want to make that a much bigger part of the show. You know, I feel like you might relate. You just kind of get caught in like trying to keep shows coming out every week. As far as like a strategic vision, that's something that's super important to me.
Thank you so much. It was a very insightful thing that you just mentioned. And I feel like people, really valued from that. They got a lot of value from that. My last question, Ken, is what is that one thing you wish, or that's one thing that you want to leave the audience with today?
Oh man. You know what? I've been thinking about this a lot, and I'm living it more now. Like, if you have a big dream, if you have an objective, like, don't let it just be a dream. Don't let it be something that you just think about each day. You're like, oh man, like someday I'm going to do this. Or like, you know what? I can't wait till I get to do this. It's like, it starts now. Like, you know, and I wish I would have listened to people who said that. Because like I said, in my early 20s, I wasn't starting a podcast. I wasn't trying to do all these, you know, incredible things. I was just kind of spinning my wheels. And I think there's a place and a time for that, you know, but I had a lot of these big dreams and objectives back then. I just didn't take any action. So, you know, whatever that is for the folks listening, if it's a weight loss goal, if it's, you know, some sort of school that you want to get into, you want to start a podcast, like, it's scary, it's daunting. Everyone feels that way. Okay. It's not like the people who do this have some sort of like characteristic or ability that you don't have. It's the same for everyone. I still get nervous for podcasts. I still, when I get a big guest and they show up, I'm like, oh shit. Like, are they going to know that I don't really know what I'm doing? I'm like, am I prepared? I'm like, what am I going to ask them? I'm like, oh my God. Like, what if it becomes clear that they know so much more than me? It never happens. You know, like you need to take action. And I wish I could remember the quote, but like, basically, like, whatever you're passionate about and you want to do, like, you got to step in the arena, because no one's going to do it for you. So if you're on the fence, you're thinking about doing something, like, take that first small step today, because you will be shocked how quickly it builds and where it takes you. That's what I would say.
Thank you so much, Ken. I mean, that was also a very big lesson for me. You know, a part of it was a lesson and a part of it was an appreciation, kind of, self-appreciation. Because I'm in my 20s and I started this and I started a lot of stuff. And it was only because I started, making conscious action towards it. I had these dreams and I wanted to do all of this for so many years. But, it was until now that I started taking action on it. And every single day, it's an every single day struggle. And that's a very beautiful thing, once you take action, once you take that first step, the kind of momentum that builds upon is amazing, is exponential, to be honest.
It's unbelievable. And I think if you talk to people, it's okay. Let's take the Tim Ferrisses of the world, right? Global recognition, books, TV shows, incredible podcasts.
Every single thing. He's amazing. He's a legend.
He is. But I bet, like, if you talk to him, he probably had the same fears, the same doubts. And like the first kind of step that got that ball rolling was really small. And he probably didn't know all of the ways that he was going to go with his business. but that's kind of the exciting part too, and why I'm excited about this show, and like being on the phone with you. You have no idea where it's going to lead. You have no idea what opportunity or relationship it's going to create for you. So
That is so true, Ken. And I have this timer remaining. We've just 10 seconds to go, and before Instagram is going to shut this off. Thank you so much. I'm so honored and grateful to have you here. Thank you so much.